My name is Rachel Huxley. I'm Director of Knowledge and Learning at C40 Cities Climate Leadership Group. Thanks for inviting me. Pleasure to be here tonight. Thanks for the perfect segue, because in terms of thinking holistically about climate, air quality and health, that was kind of one of the key themes of what I was going to talk about. So I wanted to share some of the experiences that we've had over the last 2-3 years, looking not just at climate, which obviously you'd expect from C40, but also looking at air quality and health, working with a fantastic team at Bureau Happold here to do that. So thinking about climate, air quality and health, for our cities and in our cities, that represents a massive challenge and a big problem for them. But it's also, not to be too cliched about it, a huge opportunity. We can't afford not to address these issues. We know that, the science is clear, but we can't afford also not to address them holistically, which, as Joe was saying, you know, we have to think holistically. We have to link up our thinking, not just about air quality and health, but about climate, air quality and health. What we're seeing across C40, across the cities that we're working with, is that air pollution and the impact that that's having on health is a massive concern for citizens. So what that creates is the political pressure, or if you're a mayor that already wants to do something about it, the political space for bold, ambitious action. And, you know, we are a network led by mayors for mayors. We're a very political network, and we can't take bold, ambitious action unless we've got that voter support. So air quality gives us that in a way that climate perhaps doesn't. People think of it as longer term, but I hope everyone in this room realizes it's happening right now. But people think of climate change as a longer term, less tangible, less immediate issue, whereas air quality is immediate, tangible, and local for them. So for us, that concern that we see across C40 cities really creates the space for bold political action, which, as Duncan was saying earlier, you know we need. So for us, how we take advantage of that kind of window of opportunity, if you like, is critical. And we really need to make sure we avoid the mistakes of the past. So addressing climate change without thinking about air quality, or addressing air pollution without thinking about climate change. So Dieselgate is a classic example of that, where you kind of really only ticking one box and then suffering later on. At C40, as I say, air pollution is a big and increasing issue for us, and that's driven by the priorities of our mayors. So we've started an air quality program across the organisation. We're doing work on monitoring and modelling. We've set up a network of 30-odd cities so that they can peer share between them, develop and accelerate best practice and share solutions. But we've also been undertaking research over the past 2-3 years, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about now, and our experiences of working directly with cities to kind of test out that research on the ground. So the research is part of our benefits program. Most people would call it co-benefits, know it as co-benefits. And in the run-up to the Paris COP, we did a piece of research that showed that of the barriers facing cities in terms of taking climate action, one of the main ones was making the case for climate action. So what I mean by that is that making the case that climate is not in conflict with your social and your economic development, rather that it's complementing social and economic goals that you might have. So how can we help cities quantify and, where appropriate and possible, monetize the benefits beyond GHG reductions of them taking climate action? And it was about, I think, just over 2 years ago now, we started research on particularly looking at the sort of linkage between climate, air quality and health. Duncan's last slide, I think, was a thought leadership piece that we put out together at the sort of October time last year, showing where the overlaps are between the sources of the problems, the sources of GHG emissions, the sources of air pollution in cities. And transport, industry and buildings, unsurprisingly, kind of come up as three major areas. And all of that needs to be underpinned by a kind of decarbonised grid. So we work with, over the last couple of years, 26 cities to date on that. So just to kind of stop talking in the abstract and give a few examples, we work with Jakarta to help them make the case for tighter restrictions and regulations on the most polluting vehicles. We worked with Dar es Salaam to make the case for a bus rapid transit scheme, for Ho Chi Minh City to look at how they could electrify scooters. They've got 7 million scooters, mopeds rolling around the city, so how do they deal with that? And Mexico City to look at industrial emissions scheme. So that's just a sort of flavour. And in working with those cities, we've learned, I would say, sort of we got 6 key kind of lessons that we feel have come out of that experience. And the first is around targeting the problem. And for us, I know that sounds incredibly obvious, but a lot of our conversations with the cities would start at one point, hey, we want to take this action because we think this is really what we need to do to tackle climate and air pollution. And actually, when we delve down into the numbers, and you don't need to go very far, you just need really high-level numbers on GHG emissions and air quality, you can pretty quickly see where the sources of the problem are. And some cities were like completely focusing in the wrong areas in terms of where they could make progress. So just to give you an example there, Auckland came to us wanting to work on their congestion charge, which is a really excellent action, but through the analysis that we did with them, we realised that looking at their NO2 pollution in particular, their bus fleet was a huge source of the problem. So they're now working on electrifying the whole of the bus fleet. Being able to look at that and target the problem and look at the data, help them roll out that program of electrification of their bus fleet. So that's the first kind of thing. How am I doing for time? Okay, all right, you just yell when I go on too long. The second one is communications. So data per se is not going to do anything on its own. So we help the cities estimate the impact that they're going to have on air pollution from a particular action, what that impact on air pollution is then going to have on health, and what that health benefits are, what are the economic value of those health benefits. But those numbers on their own aren't going to do anything. And so how you communicate and engage with your citizens in particular as the voters that are then going to drive the mayor is really important. So a couple of examples. London, I think, we take no credit for this. We haven't worked with them on this, but their communications campaigns, I think, are fantastic. But Medellin is one of the cities that we work with, and they were using the NO2 tubes, getting citizens to kind of measure air pollution, so suddenly it becomes something that they could really understand, and that's driven a huge amount of pressure. Now they get their citizens coming to them saying, what are you going to do about air pollution? In terms of the third thing, we would say as a lesson learned is net impact. So we obviously focus on the benefits. We're very biased. We think any action against climate change and air quality is good, but you need to look at the costs, you need to look at the negative impacts, you need to be aware of those. If you're not, you can risk a real backlash. In terms of sort of an example of that, if we work with some cities on road closures, and you might be closing a road in a central area of the city and you're rerouting traffic through perhaps a more residential area, you're actually going to increase the impact in terms of people exposed to air pollution by doing that. So then what we would do is we would zoom out and look at the bigger picture of, okay, is that a short-term loss for a longer-term gain in terms of recapturing the city or from the car, if you like, so it's a longer journey to kind of get people out of vehicles. So considering all of those sorts of things, we work with a couple of cities on electrification programs, either in informal settlements or looking at getting people away from using wood-burning stoves. Big air quality win, but in the short term could really be a problem for climate change. But again, we looked at the bigger picture of what was going on in terms of the grid and where they were getting that electricity from. So that was the third one, thinking about net impact. The fourth one, equity and inclusivity. We've already heard how important that is. And really just for our cities, in terms of tackling climate change, in terms of tackling air quality, we do need to think really hard about where the benefits and the costs are distributed for doing that. A really nice example is the work that Mexico City have been doing in terms of where their new bike facilities are going to go and trying to target them in deprived neighbourhoods that aren't well served by transport already. The fifth lesson is collaboration. So we talked about holistic thinking. We've both talked about holistic joined-up thinking, and that has to play out in a very practical way in terms of cities talking to each other. So departments within cities need to work together. We have to break down those silos, which is as hard as it is for everything else, but we really find that this kind of working with cities across these three things brings together a range of people. So Barcelona, we're looking at a low emission zone. Their transport team worked with the health team in a way that they just hadn't before and developed some really good links and shared data and expertise and insights that they hadn't previously done. And the last lesson, kind of from our experience of working with all of those 26 cities trying to make a big impact on GHG emissions and on air pollution, was you have to think big. Some of the cities that we worked with initially were really disappointed by the outcome that they got going through our methodology and finding out, okay, what's going to be the impact on life expectancy, on avoided deaths? And it seemed kind of at the start that was a bit of a fail on our part and our approach, but actually, really then we just went and re-looked at what they were planning on doing, where they were focusing their efforts, and encouraged them to think much bigger. So Salvador, as an example, were looking at upgrading from Euro 2, I think, to Euro 6. Only a portion of their bus fleet, and the analysis, we reran the analysis to look at upgrading the whole of their bus fleet to electric vehicles, and just being able to show that you need to think big to get that dent in air pollution that you need to really impact health across the city. And I think the kind of, in terms of thinking big, one of the things to remember is that not all of the air pollution in a city comes from the city and is within their control. So some of the cities we've worked with have been super inspirational. They ran the analysis and they were like, oh, we can't, you know, Mexico City, looking at their industry scheme that they had going on, they were like, we can't tackle half of this problem. This is a state problem. So, you know, oh no, now what do we do? And they said, okay, well, we'll go statewide. And they're going statewide. And Venice, the same, small area, but the problem of air pollution is in the kind of wider whole basement catchment area. And they've started the program in their city, but they're taking it out to the whole Padano agreement. So you're seeing it go from about 400,000 citizens to potentially 22 million. And I'll stop there.